Hello. So today we're going to be talking about data quality. And I'm going to share my screen with you. And I want to have a conversation with all three of you about some of these main topics we're going to talk about and get your opinions on where we land, where our definitions are for those. So I'm sharing my screen now. You should see the data governance framework with quality here. Can everyone see that? Awesome. And welcome.
Yes.
So interact as much as you want, ask questions, tell me what your thoughts on each of these are. So when we think about data quality, we broke it up into a couple different pieces here, and we wanted to get started with completeness. So I sort of said, okay, completeness for me has two main sections: people and organizations, like our members, and then the activity those people and organizations do. So when you think about people and organizations, talk to me about completeness. What are some of the things we really care about?
For us, email is really important for people because we use it to set up portal logins as a unique identifier. So it's a super important aspect for us.
Awesome. I had email as one of my primary things in my cheat sheet as well. What else do we think about as far as people and organizations we might want to be complete about?
I think it. Sorry, go ahead.
No, you can go first.
Well, I was going to say, and this is the part of the problem that we struggle with is we have so many different varieties of people, right?
Yeah.
I mean, like, so for example, for our membership database, well, we care about, their name, their address, mailing address, because they may receive physical journals.
Yeah.
But if it's a survey response, then no, yeah, we only care about email addresses and maybe some of their demographics.
Okay.
So,
okay. So I agree with you there. When we do anonymous surveys, it can be challenging to know these things. Let's focus today on the people that we do know. And I think you've hit the nail on the head so far. So we've got sort of our unique identifier email address. We got to have that for most people, if not. And then we're starting to get some of the flavor on our people and our organization. So your name, your address, your demographics, those sort of things. Neil, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I was going to mention those name and address. They kind of took them away from me. I guess we usually try to know what organization they work for when they're a member of our association. Yeah, so that's the other one that comes to mind right now.
Yeah. All right, so then let's think about completeness for these things. And I want to break it into two groups. So what level of completeness is okay? If we have people in our database, do we need 100% of their email addresses? What if we're missing email addresses on people? Is that okay? No.
Not for us generally.
Not for us either.
Okay, so 100% of the email address we need to have. Got it. So then what about the rest of the stuff? Do we need 100% of someone's demographics to make decisions or to understand their activity? What level of completeness around demographics is okay?
My association is unique. We're a trade association. So, for us, there are certain demographics that their membership is built off of. For example, we're a campground association. So their site count, that's what their dues are based off of. So that's a piece of demographic information that is required for them to join. And their physical address is also required because their dues are based on what state they're located in. So for us, I would say those two factors are 100% necessary, but we're unique.
No, I love it. And that's what is so important about this data governance policy is it's not what do we think and what does Stephanie and Neil think, it's what is important for Heather and your organization. And within this framework, we're gonna talk about our uniqueness. And I want everyone to feel comfortable sharing their uniqueness today. Does anybody else have an opinion on like what level of completeness is okay?
Yeah, ours is slightly different, similar but slightly different. So we need name, but address isn't quite as important as role within the company and title, company that they work for.
Okay. Good information. One thing we were talking about in preparation for this is, so imagine a member goes to your website to join, and I know not everybody has the sort of join page. But on that join page, how do we make the distinguishing between like what are the required fields like out of the box, and then what are the required fields we want to make? And then I always sort of imagine this balance between asking too many questions and making it hard versus just making it really easy but not getting critical information. So when you built your join process or your join forms, how did you determine, well, we have to make this mandatory? Sounds like Heather, something like physical address and size are important, versus it would be really nice to know someone's favorite color, but do we really need to know that? How do you sort of think about those?
We're currently, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Well, I mean, to join, we try to make it as easy as possible. So we initially require just the name and email address. And then after that, we try to get more information. And the other thing that I didn't mention yet is we also try to get the age, which I don't think anybody mentioned.
They didn't know.
So at my current association, we're looking at redoing our membership application and actually kind of getting rid of a lot of this stuff. We currently don't ask for age or their demographics in any way, shape, or form, basically to make it a more streamlined process for members to join. And then hopefully through prompt fuel and emails, we can get them to update their membership at a later time.
We're going to call that progressive profiling. Awesome. Okay, these are really good thoughts. So as I was preparing for this, I sort of had this just random number I picked, like 80% of our fields should be there and good. But it seems to me like we almost have two types of demographics. One is like, we need these are critical business demographics, and the others are sort of nice to have demographics around role, title, and age. And if we can get them through progressive profiling or behavior interactions, that would be awesome. We could, continue to update our fields. When we think about other types of data completeness we want, I thought the other category might be activities. So we have our member organizations and we have our individuals that have joined. These entities are going to do stuff. What are some of the things they might do that we would record? And think about completeness when we record those activities. What are some things like an activity we would record somebody does something?
Attend a webinar.
Okay, so if someone's going to attend a webinar, this is a sticky one to start with. Is that an anonymous you can join, or does I have to like register as a member so you know who I am?
We require them to register.
Okay, so we have known attendees on our webinars. None of this Zoom free for all. Anybody can come and we can't track it.
Right.
When we think about an activity, so we know that they attended. What else might we want to know about that activity? So if you're attending a webinar, what are some of the fields on that webinar attendance you might want to track?
Do they want to register for more emails? Do we want to opt in to our email lists? That's always a good one. We're currently dealing with a lot of that right now.
That's a great one. I didn't think about that one at all. I was thinking more technical stuff. So some of the things I were thinking were we might want to know about an order, we might want to know the date they purchased or made that order. We may want to know an amount, right? We certainly want to know who the person or organization is, and we might want some sort of description. So did you register for the webinar in the spring or in the fall? How much did you pay for that webinar? If it's an organization, did one person or did 5 people come? Awesome. Outside of maybe a purchase, what are some other activities we may want to know about an entity that participates with us?
Attend a meeting.
Okay.
We track access to basically our what we call our learning portal. It's our LMS basically. So accessing education documents and such.
Awesome. Good stuff. What about something like being on a committee? Would we want to track who's on committees? Is that something we can think we might want to track? What about like voting? If a member can vote, do we care if they vote or not? All right. I'm looking at the clock and I think we've got a good idea of completeness. You all had really different thoughts than we had, which is why we wanted to crowdsource this. Let's move on to our next topic here, which is timeliness. And I think we'll have some different opinions on timeliness now. And let's think about a retention policy. And I want to make a statement out there, and I want you to agree or disagree and talk about why. We keep our member data forever, and that's really good.
I disagree with that statement immensely.
Why?
As someone who's been a member of associations in the past, if they have my information forever and I have not been a member for 10 years and I start getting emails, it's going to make me as a former member not want to go back and join. In addition to the fact that maintaining member data forever makes me twitchy. And my personal preference is 5 years or whatever's ever mandated to maintain by the IRS.
Right. It also becomes not relevant.
I will play devil's advocate. I agree with pretty much all of that, but I would say active member data, hang on to for as long as you can for the purposes of longevity programs.
Oh, yeah. Okay. We might have two sections of this. We might say active member data we keep forever. As long as you're an active member in good standing, you came to our conference 10 years ago, we need to know that. But from Amanda's standpoint, I'm no longer an active member. Why do you keep emailing me about rejoining? I'm not even in that field anymore. Knock it off.
Totally agree with that.
So that's a little bit different. Like keeping data, your organization may mandate that you keep membership records. You know, we've been around for 175 years. We have records of who our members were. They're esteemed scientists and all that. So that, but we don't email people who aren't interested in it, right? So there's this concept of how long do you keep it and how long do you actually act on it?
I love that. Keeping data versus acting on data. Great points there. When I was thinking about data retention, I was thinking about keeping that email address and still using it. But you're saying there's historical things that we need to keep forever. If you won that prestigious award 50 years ago, we need to keep that documented and we need to make sure we retain that insight. Very interesting. Okay. Love it. Amanda, you hit the nail on the head with why I think a data retention policy is really important. Because if we're keeping your email address on file for 5 or 6 years and you're not a member anymore and you start unsubscribing or you bounce, that could really hurt our sender reputation. So if we're thinking about our data retention policy, how long we might keep an email address, one question I had was, can we go back and look at our historic data and say, you know, if a member doesn't renew, on average, 3 years after that, we never get them back. Like, could we use like our own data to help inform our policy? Has anybody done that or have any ideas around how we might use our own data to inform some of our retention policies?
I think if you've not been a member, but they still have your email address from past associations I've worked for, it's not that they don't use your information anymore. It's that they change the messaging, if that makes sense. So it goes from renew your membership to what did we do wrong? How can we make it right? Like, how can we get you to rejoin the association?
Yeah.
It definitely changes the messaging.
For us, it's a little different. Again, campground association. So if we have really, really old data and somebody hasn't renewed their campground membership, it's very likely it's a new owner. So we would approach it as a brand new member, somebody who probably doesn't even know who we are. So we would treat them as somebody who's like, hey, you know, you probably don't know us. Let us reintroduce ourselves, but same concept.
Love it. Love it. Good insight so far. Really good stuff. All right, skipping down a little bit further here. Let's tackle some of these like integrity. So if we're capturing some of these demographics in one system or an email address in one system, we don't just have one system, we have multiple systems. How do we ensure our data is consistent across all of our platforms? Do we have a policy in place to sort of allow for that to be documented or mandated, or what do we do if somebody goes rogue and sort of buys some other system and creates some disconnected data. How do we think about that?
We're
Panic.
pretty we're pretty diligent in our association. Our database is king. We say if it's not in Salesforce, it doesn't exist. So that's our stance. We try really hard not to use data that's not in our database.
Love it. I use that with my team all the time. If it's not in Salesforce, it didn't happen. It doesn't exist.
Yep.
But we had this book sale and people bought lots of books. No, they didn't. Stephanie, did you have some thoughts?
Yeah, well, we're trying to get there. We'd like to be there. We've got multiple systems and we'd like to be in the database is king, and we do have Salesforce. So,
well, tell me about a problem it creates. What problem do you experience if you have disconnected data?
oh, if we are emailing out of our marketing platform and it doesn't match up and someone is opted out on one place or the other and we email them anyway, that's a huge issue.
Yeah. That's a really big one. And actually, when we get back together, we're going to talk about who has access to email addresses and why. And one of those things we want to prevent is, it's not that I don't want you to email people. It's just, we have a process you're supposed to go through, and our calendar and our opt-outs, the process is defined to handle those. And if you go rogue and just start emailing people, you may not know where those checkboxes live. Big one.
I think you have to handle email address changes. And if you have the email spread across systems, that becomes problematic.
Awesome. So that's a really big one. I think if we're going to show people data in a third-party system, do we allow them to edit it in that system? Do we send them back to our main portal and have them edit it and then send them back to the place they were? So how do we handle changes in info is going to be a really important policy for us to not have disparate information. Love it. Okay. Sorry, I'm looking at the clock and I'm counting time. I think we have a couple minutes left. We've tackled a bunch of policies so far, and we've got a really good framework on what I think are some of the most important pieces we need to talk about here. When we get back together, we have about 3 minutes to summarize. Does anybody want to volunteer to be our summarizer? Or if you'd like, I can do it. And does anybody want to say what are the most important takeaways that we want to summarize for our group today?
You've got my vote, Greg.
Same.
All right, I will be the talker for our group, but you have to help me. If we're going to talk about one or two things, what are the 1 or 2 important things we want the group to know who weren't in our session?
You
Don't
talk
be
about email because it touches each of these items.
Okay,
The
email address.
importance to keeping the policy.
Yep, got it.
I think that retention policy and when to get rid of old data is interesting. Actually, I took some notes on that because it's something I'd like to take back to my own association.
Yeah, I think that's a really good one. I think we as associations tend to be hoarders of data, and we want to just collect it and use it. But when we talk about data retention, it's actually a benefit to not keep that data, right? I don't want to annoy Amanda and keep emailing her. I don't want to hurt my sender reputation. So when we think about why does this policy exist, there's a benefit to having this policy in place. Not only then we get to Delo's part about security, we might have, what if we get hacked and all of our member email addresses get stolen from the last 100 years? And they're like, well, why were you storing my email address? I haven't been a member for 20 years. What's going on here? So these policies don't have to be seen as a negative or like as a don't do this. These policies, I think when done correctly, are seen as a positive. This is why we're doing this. There's a benefit to us and to the members to follow this policy. It's not a negative, it's a net benefit that we have this in writing. Awesome. Well, as we think about this, email addresses being king and being something that we need to have as a primary identifier, and really everybody should have an email address. So there should be no way to get into our database without that. We talked about there's other things we want to know, but they're not necessarily required from everybody. We might want to make it easy for people to get in and then progressively profile them. talked about that. I love the data retention policy. We can certainly focus on, and this integrity, right? If it's not in Salesforce, if it's not on our database, it doesn't exist. We'll certainly bring that up to the group as well. So we've got our 1 minute warning here. Anything else that we want to talk about that we thought was important?
Just the opt-out as including the emailing, the opt-in, opt-out for the integrity.
Yes, opt out. Thank you. Thank you. Awesome. Well, this has been a lot of fun so far. This worked out way better than I thought. Thanks everybody for participating in our breakout session. I'm really excited to join back with everybody and share what we've talked about.